Hello and welcome to our another session of Media Law, Ethics and Literacy. I am Parvez Khan. I am an assistant professor in the Department of Journalism and Mass Communication, Cohort University of Science and Technology. The course code is GMC 351. It's our lecture number 15, which is Citizen Journalism. So today we'll be discussing what citizen journalism is about, how it came to rise, what it means in the modern digital world, and what can it achieve in our times, what it has done. We'll be discussing it in detail. So let's, before starting our session, let's talk about the objectives of this session. Students will be able to understand the concept of citizen journalism, what citizen journalism means. They will be able to understand that ordinary citizens too have the power to contribute in journalism, they have the power to make an impact, they have the power to tell their side of the story. Then we'll be discussing the pros and cons of citizen journalism, and we'll be discussing all these things in the context of the digital platforms, the rise in technology, and all these things, because in the last decade or so, digital technologies have evolved and it has even strengthened the citizen journalism. So, what is citizen journalism? Uh, the Oxford Dictionary defines citizen journalism as the collection, dissemination, and analysis of news and information by the general public, especially by means of internet. Now, this is just a very simplistic definition, but it's important to share what dictionary is saying about it. So, it's basically the collection, dissemination, and analysis of news and information by the general public. So, the phrase here, general public, is the most important one here because obviously it's ordinary citizens, it's people who are sharing their version of the story, what they're seeing, they're sharing it, what they think is the right thing that they want to people to know. That's what the general public is sharing. So that's what is citizen journalism. So if you look deeper into it, it's also known as public journalism because members of the public playing a pivotal role in the process of collecting, reporting, analyzing, and disseminating news and information. So the purpose is to cater independent, accurate, reliable, wide-ranging, and relevant info. Well, this purpose is independent. The most important thing is independent one. It's also, but there's still some doubt when we talk about its accuracy and reliability, which we'll talk about in the coming slides. But this is what it is. It's basically the public journalism. It can be a small event, it can be anything. For example, if a fire takes place in the neighborhood, when people come out, they record it and share it. That's what public journalism, citizen journalism is all about. It can be an ordinary event, it can also be a mega event, it can be anything. If public are responding to it, that is citizen journalism. It's just like if you're not associated with any typical news organization or media organization. So that's what citizen journalism is all about. So, citizen journalists have become more and more popular over the years, especially when they're encouraged by the current advances in technology and social media. It's very important to understand that citizen journalism gained its strength because alternate platforms were provided, because everyone is now carrying a gadget in their phones and they're having apps and applications. They can just log in, they can share anything in instant. It depends on the internet speed, connectivity, but things can get viral within minutes and seconds. So this is what is done. The internet, the digital technology, particularly in the last 15 years, has evolved to the extent that it has empowered people to share stories, to tell their version of the story, to cover an event or report on what's happening, or even express their own opinion on the important matters. This is an important breakthrough because, particularly, the rise in social media platforms such as Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, Instagrams, it just provides a platform for instant upload and sharing. And the amazing thing about these platforms is instant feedback as well. Because the moment you upload something, there's a reaction to it. People can like it, people can dislike it, people can comment, people can share. And it's just incredibly powerful medium. And it's believed that it has empowered citizens to post and share their thoughts online. So, yes, these are some of the important points that we need to keep in our mind when we're talking about citizen journalism, because it has become more popular over the years. It has been encouraged by the current advances in technology and social media. It has exploited and these platforms such as Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, because of its immediacy and feedback content. It has empowered citizens, in short, that they can share their contents online. Now let's look at the picture here. That obviously there's some fire incident and everyone is taken out almost their mobile phones, they're recording, and this is just to tell you what citizen journalism is. That if you see something, if there's an event, if there's happening, if there is some issue going on, it can be a catastrophe as well. It can be anything. So that's what citizen journalism are. Just take out your gadgets. And what has changed over the years is that previously only the specialized people were doing journalism. They had their mics, they had their camera phones, they had all their gadgets, and they used to combine them and go out. Now you have them all in your pocket with just a simple smartphone. You have everything. You have access to internet. You have access to record anything. The camera is there. The voice recorder is in it. The applications are there. The platforms are there to be shared. So it's a completely new world. And last 10, 15 years have completely changed the shape of journalism. And it has also affected the mainstream journalism over the years. But we'll go a bit into that later on as well. But let's go into types. Some of the types is that you can share photographs, videos, and audio, posting on blogs, Facebook, and other social media sites. There can be sharing of opinions. You can comment on things, and you can find things that are online. You can comment. You can become a citizen journalist by sharing your opinion with others, and also sharing of discovery and sharing of information with the world after discovering something important and of some news value that you can share. For example, if you have gone to some place and you find something unusual and you think that it would be of interest to people, you can share it. So that's what keeps happening, and that's why there's so much data, there's so much information pouring around. We are living in basically an information age today. Everything's about information, and every minute things keep changing. And in addition to this, it's also about sharing of expertise, creating a blog, or doing a report on a topic you're knowledgeable on, even though you're not a journalist. And it's pretty common these days that we seek the experts speaking on issues. For example, in this pandemic, we saw many people who were associated with health. They were guiding people on to take the precautionary measures. Similarly, microbiologists were talking more about the viruses, or anyone from different fields. So this explains that in the modern world is much more connected, where experts can come, they can share their opinions. It's not just the journalists that have to do the thing. We can sometimes have some expert opinions from the relevant field that they've worked on for years. And this is what makes it pretty much exciting as well, that when you log on and when you search the hashtag handles, you come across different people, you come across their mindset, you come across the trends, you come across the hot topics that are going on online. So that's pretty much, it gives you an insight about the psyche of the people living in a particular area. So why the need? Earlier, the audiences were considered as passive receivers of media messages, but now technological development changed the situation. So the need came itself. The audience started changing. The audience became much more active. They wanted to participate in the ongoing debates on media and things happening. They wanted their version of the story to be heard. They want to express their opinion on issues. So this is why the need came from, and that's why these platforms are ever growing. And obviously, the free, diverse, and neutral voices and communication enhances the standards of democracy. That's what pro democracy people say, but some also believe that it can cause problems if the facts are not verified. But anyway, it provides an alternate space. It provides a platform for alternate media and all that. Stories that cannot find its place in mainstream often make a strong statement through citizen journalism. So this is where it becomes very important when you're not heard, when there is a lot of social issues, or there's a lot of disparity. the only medium that you can rely strongly on these days is social media. Things can get viral, things can spread out, and it can have an impact. And it can also force the mainstream press to cover a story. So we can talk about the advantages. There's some of the advantages that are associated with the citizen journalism is that it gives an opportunity to cover all sides of the story. You can know first-hand experiences of the people living. You can have access to remote regions that you've never heard about. For example, if you believe that there is a certain critical story that involves crime in a particular area, and you can't just go there physically, but you can have access to what people are saying. You can have an opinion about it. So you can have different sides of the story, what people are saying, what the politicians are saying, what the press is saying, what the general people are saying. And it's extremely crucial role in the war and crisis. Particularly, we have seen that initially there was a lot of embedded journalism when journalists were forced to go out with the military persons, but that carried a lot of consequences, ethical consequences, because journalists were bound not to cover stories that could harm the reputation of the forces that took them there. So in the Iraq War and Afghan War, initially the embedded journalism worked, but later on, the independent filmmakers came and shared their own perspective about the wars, and that's when particularly the abuses, human rights abuses in prisons also came forward. And this is why it's important that, for example, if human rights abuses are taking place somewhere, citizen journalism has an important role to play. And particularly, some of the regions are no-go areas. An ordinary journalist or a journalist with working with even a stronger media organization sometimes cannot reach there. It's the local citizens that are empowered. They can share their story. They're independent filmmakers that can share the story. So the role of citizen journalism in war and crisis. For example, you remember the floods, and you cannot go to a place which is already in crisis. It's almost the access issues at times. So that's when people, local people, share their stories, share their version. If they're stuck somewhere, like yesterday, I was looking at a news story, and some of the people were caught in the landsliding near the Gilgit-Baltistan area. They just tweeted on the Twitter, and after that, some rescue operation took place in Pakistan in those areas. So this explains the power of citizen journalism, what it can do. Don't take it lightly, because it can have a serious impact. And then obviously it has the opportunities for local communities and ordinary citizens to tell their bit of story, to share what their story is, to share their point of view. Their representation also matters. And then it focuses on small but real challenges, and sometimes these real challenges are amplified, they're highlighted, and they get real coverage. It also brings local issues to a bigger level, because obviously sometimes some places are not into media's coverage. Sometimes they're deliberately avoided by mainstream press, and this is where some local issues are taken to a bigger level, particularly when it's of general interest to people, particularly when it's about crime or human rights abuses. It also identifies gaps in the mainstream press. If a story is not covered by mainstream press, it usually gets covered through this. So this is another opportunity that the citizen journalism provides. And then it is not influenced by advertisers or corporate interest in generally. Sometimes it can be influenced. There can be a personalized view. That's a downside to it. But obviously there are no advertisements or corporate interest. So that's why people like to listen to people's story. The most important thing to a journalist is a story. He wants to hear it. And that's what citizen journalism is best at, giving stories. And then the disadvantage is you cannot rely on its sources, the things you see on social media or through citizen journalism. There's an issue with fact verification, the issue with sources, that can be a problem. Sometimes there's a lot of ambiguity. It can create problems for people covering story. Most of the time, it is subjective. It's more of an opinion than a fact, and that's why it's different from traditional journalism, which is obviously working on different sides of a story. It's looking for sources, it's looking for verification. So journalism, the real journalism that's taken in mainstream press is a little different. It requires a lot more scrutiny, verification, and obviously editing, and obviously the role of editors and gatekeepers is very important in traditional journalism. And it can, and this citizen journalism can also lead to defamation and affect vulnerable people. For example, if you're carrying a vendetta against someone, you can launch a mission, you can start saying things that you don't like about someone on your YouTube channel or Facebook. That can lead to defamation, that can affect vulnerable people. Even people, there are lots of vulnerable people, for example, transgender community, or there's issue of forced marriages or anything else. You can further create a lot of issues for people if you're not aware of journalistic standards. And then obviously citizens don't know about journalistic standards. That is problematic itself, because journalism has, the major thing about journalism is that it's a responsibility towards society. You need to keep a lot of things into mind. You need to keep a balance of fairness to your story. You have to verify sources. That's what makes traditional journalism different. But ordinary citizens, they don't care. They think that their side of the story is the perfect one. What they're saying is the right thing, and this is where it works. But anyway, we have to look at the both sides, and the advantages are definitely there. It gives you perspective, and perspective is also very important. Which is why don't underestimate the power of citizen journalism, because some of the key examples, for example, Haiti earthquake in 2010, the coverage was immense. International bodies took keen interest after everything was spread like fire on the internet. And then we have example of Arab Spring, because after the tweet, the revolutions and the people coming out challenging their current governments, this was surprising. This indicated for the first time a lot of studies were conducted to understand the role of social media, to understand the role of citizen journalism, to understand the power an ordinary citizen have when he has all these gadgets in his hands. And more recently, we are seeing a lot of coverage on Black Lives Matter. People are tweeting, people are obviously protesting, particularly about the Black lives that have escalated in America and elsewhere in Europe as well, because when lawful imprisonment or someone who's killed during a police operation, and if it leads to racial profiling, that's what they looked into, and that was amplified after things got viral on the internet. Now we have to look at Pakistan and citizen journalism, because mainstream press at times cannot cover stories. This is where citizen journalism comes in handy, particularly in the Pakistani context. And then in the last decade or so, the internet usage has increased in Pakistan, and it has provided alternate spheres to citizens to comment, share, and express content online. There have been many stories. Sometimes they don't get coverage, particularly in the areas, in the no-go areas, but things keep coming out of on the online media, and it really leads to questions, and also it gives a perspective about how things are, particularly in the cities and the crimes and all these things. And then there's a lot of public pressure, which also forces mainstream media to cover a story if it's in the larger public interest. Obviously, the greatest example would be the kidnapping of kids, the molestation of kids, and then obviously the murder stories that came forward, and a lot of police actions were taken. That's another big story that came out forward in Pakistan. But again, there's a downside to it as well. It can lead to false news and breach of privacy, and that can be really problematic. But in general, if the citizen journalism has provided an alternate voice for the voiceless in Pakistani context. And there are important considerations when you are a citizen journalist. You have to act responsibly. You have to look at the words and the images that have consequences. You have to consider that. There is absence of gatekeeping, makes it a blessing and a curse. And obviously, one must also always check facts, and one must also consider that the opinions that are being shared, they must also be checked, and one must know that citizen journalism is not fact, but it's an opinion. And it's pretty much clear. We must understand that it can be a personalized version of events. We must look into that. And lastly, the harm limitation principle must be ensured at all costs. We must look at minimum harm done. So this is pretty much it for the session for today. And then we're going to wind up on the questions that we are having. How important it is to have active citizens participating on online platforms. Should moral and ethical guidelines be there in citizen journalism? Is it important to look into the moral and ethical guidelines? Then we have to look into, does it provide an alternate medium? Do you think that social media, do you think does provide an alternate medium? And what is your opinion? Because obviously your opinion also matters regarding, have you ever shot a story that had an impact? Do you cover stories based on your locality? How important do you think are local stories? So this is what we are looking forward to, because as an active journalism student, if you're participating actively as a citizen, it will also help you grow as a journalist. So I would strongly encourage you to work on stories, to cover stories for your local communities, to take care of if there's any issue that you need to look into. But remember, there's a lot of responsibility at hands as well. It must not be your one-sided story. It must not be based on vendetta against someone. This is the key point for citizen journalism that we have to look into as journalists as well. So these are the references that we've used. Obviously, we are using the books, the Handbook of Mass Media Ethics, and this is pretty much it. So I hope you enjoyed this session. This is pretty much it. We'll be looking forward to you for in another session. Have a good day. Goodbye.